Princess Victoria Eugenie of Battenberg was the great-grandmother of the current King of Spain, Felipe VI. Her wedding, which took place in 1906, was one of the worst in history, both bloody and tragic. But this was just the beginning of a series of unfortunate events. Princess Battenberg's marriage was doomed, and she faced a harsh fate in Spain, where many hated her. What tragic events occurred at the wedding, and what other suffering did Victoria Eugenie of Battenberg endure? In this video, you'll discover her heartbreaking story. Princess Victoria Eugenie of Battenberg, also known as Princess Elena, who later became the Queen Consort of Spain, was born on October 24, 1887, at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. Her childhood was closely tied to the British royal family, as she was the granddaughter of Queen Victoria. Princess Elena was the sixth child and only daughter of Prince Henry of Battenberg and Princess Beatrice of the United Kingdom. Her father, Prince Henry, was part of the German aristocracy, but through his marriage to Princess Beatrice, he became part of the British royal family. Her mother, Princess Beatrice, was the youngest daughter of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. Victoria Eugenie grew up surrounded by the luxury and strictness of the British royal family. She spent most of her childhood at Windsor Castle and the Isle of Wight, where her grandmother, Queen Victoria, lived. She received a typical aristocratic upbringing, focusing strongly on tradition, etiquette, and duty. Her parents, especially her mother, closely supervised her education and life to ensure she always lived up to royal standards. Overall, her childhood was happy, except for two sad events. In her youth, she once fell off a horse while riding, but she did not sustain any serious injuries, and it did not affect her health or future life. The most tragic event of her childhood was the loss of her father. In 1896, when Victoria Eugenie was just 9 years old, her father, Prince Henry, died of malaria during a military campaign in Africa. This loss deeply affected the whole family, especially her mother, Princess Beatrice, who lived in mourning after his death. Nothing else in Victoria Eugenie's childhood hinted at the tragic life she would later face. She grew up in the protected environment of the British royal family, where her future seemed destined for happiness. From a young age, Victoria Eugenie was destined for the life of an aristocrat, likely with the prospect of marriage to a European monarch. Her family ties to Queen Victoria made her a desirable match for European royal families. One day, Grand Duke Boris Vladimirovich, a cousin of the Russian Tsar Nicholas II, proposed to her. Victoria Eugenie was going to accept his proposal, but she refused at the very last moment. Indeed, she later met a more advantageous match, the young Spanish king Alfonso III. At 22, Don Alfonso was confident, intelligent, and charming, an accomplished horseman and the epitome of a chivalrous knight. Victoria Eugenie of Battenberg met her future husband, King Alfonso III of Spain, through diplomatic connections between European royal families. King Alfonso was looking for a suitable bride from European royalty, and Victoria Eugenie, the granddaughter of Queen Victoria, caught his attention. They met in 1905 at a social event, and Alfonso was immediately charmed by Victoria Eugenie. Although she came from a less powerful branch of royalty than other candidates, Alfonso was captivated by her beauty and grace. However, there was an obstacle. Victoria Eugenie was Protestant, while Alfonso was Catholic, and she would need to convert. At that time, this was a severe obstacle to marriage. Moreover, the mother of the Spanish king, Maria Cristina of Austria, immediately disliked the British princess, as she considered her lineage imperfect for becoming the Queen of Spain. Additionally, she feared that Princess Elena might bring hemophilia into their family, a rare genetic disease that was present in Queen Victoria's lineage. However, despite his mother's concerns, the young King Alfonso refused even to consider looking for another bride, as this beautiful girl had won his heart. Alfonso began to show strong interest in her, and their relationship developed quickly. In April 1806, Victoria Eugenie agreed to convert to Catholicism, removing the main barrier to their marriage. Soon after, the British and Spanish courts officially announced their engagement. The love of Don Alfonso and Princess Ina was quickly an open secret and received by the press and the people in Britain and Spain. Their courtship was truly romantic and caught the public's imagination. An idyllic couple, they exchanged small gifts and carved their names on the trees in the park. The engagement led to their royal wedding in 1906. However, the celebration day was overshadowed by a tragic incident which forever changed Victoria Eugenie's life in Spain. The preparations for Victoria Eugenie of Battenberg's wedding to King Alfonso III of Spain were grand and carefully planned, because their marriage was considered an essential diplomatic alliance. The process attracted much attention from both royal courts and the public. The wedding was meant to be a considerable event, highlighting the alliance between two powerful royal families. Madrid was chosen as the location for the ceremony. The British and Spanish royal families discussed every detail. Victoria Eugenie's wedding dress was elegant and symbolic. It was made of white silk and adorned with intricate embroidery. The dress featured royal symbols to represent her new role as queen. The gown was made in Spain and included a long veil, emphasizing her readiness to take on the responsibilities of a queen. Along with the dress, preparations were also focused on the massive guest list. Many European royalty and aristocracy members were invited, and preparing for such a critical guest list required careful planning. The wedding was expected to be one of the most significant events of the year, raising the prestige of the Spanish crown. Security was also a big concern due to the political instability in Spain at the time. The royal couple hoped their marriage would symbolize stability for the country. Despite all the careful preparations, no one could foresee the tragedy that would strike on their wedding day. What was meant to be a grand celebration of a new beginning turned into a fateful and tragic event. Victoria Eugenie of Battenberg and King Alfonso XIII married on May 31, 1906. It was supposed to be one of Spain's most essential and festive events. The ceremony was held in Madrid, and the streets were decorated with flags, flowers, and festive decorations. Many people came to see the newlyweds, and royal families and aristocrats from all over Europe were present as guests. The day started with preparations for the ceremony. Victoria Eugenie wore her magnificent white silk wedding dress with a long veil, and Alfonso XIII was dressed in a military uniform. That day, Madrid was full of celebration, decorated with bright banners and shields that displayed heraldic symbols. The emblems of Spain, Castile, and Britain were seen everywhere. People crowded the streets, eager to witness the grand event with the royal couple. Princes from across Europe had gathered for the wedding. The Church of San Geronimo was selected for the occasion. An aide-de-camp on horseback led the king's procession. Following were trumpeters, drummers, outriders, and equerries on horseback. A group of horses represented the regiments King Alfonso commanded as colonel. Next in line were the grand carriages of Spain's nobility. Princess Victoria Eugenie waited until the head of the king's procession reached the Chamber of Deputies. From there, the two processions became one. The ceremony went smoothly, and the bride and groom looked happy. After the wedding, the royal couple rode through the center of Madrid in a carriage to greet the people. But the celebration quickly turned into a tragedy. As the royal carriage moved along the street, an anarchist named Mateo Morales threw a device hidden in a bouquet at the carriage. The explosion happened around 2 p.m. as the carriage passed by one of the buildings on Calle Mayor. The king and queen miraculously survived because the device got stuck in the decorations of the carriage. However, there were numerous casualties and injuries. Mateo Morales, who caused the explosion during Victoria Eugenie and Alfonso III's wedding, was an anarchist. His motives were tied to his opposition to the monarchy and his desire to protest against the ruling class. Anarchists, especially in Spain, saw the monarchy as a symbol of oppression and inequality. For them, the royal wedding was not just a personal event, but a representation of the power they wanted to challenge. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, anarchism was a popular movement in Europe, especially among those suffering from poverty, inequality, and social injustice. Anarchists opposed existing government authority and any form of rule. They believed society should be free from governments and supported creating a world where people lived without control or force from the state. Mateo Morales decided to act to bring attention to anarchist ideas and show resistance. Like many anarchists of that time, he believed that action against those in power could speed up social change. His goal was not only to target the king and queen, but also to create fear and instability in society. After the explosion, panic broke out. The king and queen survived, but there were many casualties. Morales managed to escape, but was found later during a search. He did not survive. The explosion at the wedding caused chaos and confusion. Victoria Eugenie miraculously survived only because at the last moment she leaned toward her husband. The king later shared details of what had happened. The royal carriage was proceeding very slowly, and Victoria Eugenie, touched by the cheering of the crowd, bent her head towards the carriage window, waving with her hand on the right side. The king and queen had to switch to another carriage to continue their way to the royal palace. Of course, they had to cancel the reception and banquet planned for that day due to mourning. The gala ball intended for the next day was replaced with a memorial ceremony for the victims. However, despite the mourning, the newlyweds found the strength to appear on the royal palace balcony several times to greet the crowd. The queen's white wedding dress was stained with blood, which became a dark symbol that left a negative imprint on her entire future life. The rest of the day was passed under the shadow of tragedy. The atmosphere was somber. Instead of joy, the wedding was overshadowed by sadness for the dead and injured. The next day, despite the horrible events, the royal couple continued to fulfill their duties. They visited hospitals to check on the wounded and expressed their condolences to the families of the victims. This gesture showed their compassion and care for the people affected by the attack. The tragedy at their wedding left a deep impact on Victoria Eugenie's mental state. Although she was not physically harmed, the emotional toll was significant. This event was the first sign that her life in Spain would not be what she had imagined. The sense of threat and danger, even on what should have been the happiest day of her life, made her more reserved and cautious. Right after the wedding, Victoria Eugenie was in the spotlight of the Spanish court and public. She had to quickly adapt to a new life in a foreign country, surrounded not only by the royal family but also by aristocrats who were not always welcoming. Her British background caused distrust and suspicion among some Spaniards. Spanish society was very conservative and nationalistic, and the new queen was seen as an outsider who could not fully understand or embrace Spanish customs and culture. Victoria Eugenie struggled to integrate into Spanish society. Raised in the more liberal and open atmosphere of Britain, she faced much stricter and more conservative conditions in Spain. This cultural shock and feeling cut off from her homeland made her feel isolated. The Spanish court wasn't as warm and welcoming as she had hoped, and many people considered her unfit for the role of queen due to her British roots. Queen Maria Cristina, the mother of Alfonso XIII, disapproved of her son's choice and was initially skeptical of Victoria Eugenie. She believed her background was not high enough for a queen of Spain and doubted her ability to handle the responsibilities. While maintaining outward politeness, Maria Cristina kept her distance and did not offer the support Victoria Eugenie needed, which deepened the new queen's sense of isolation. A year after the wedding, Victoria Eugenie and Alfonso III welcomed their first child in 1907, a son named Alfonso, Prince of Asturias. At first, the heir's birth seemed joyful for the royal family and the nation. However, it soon became clear that something was wrong. The heir to the Spanish throne was diagnosed with hemophilia after undergoing circumcision. During the procedure, severe bleeding occurred, which was difficult to stop, leading to the diagnosis. This condition was passed down through Victoria Eugenie's line from her grandmother, Queen Victoria, who had carriers of this gene in her family. The terrible fears of the Spanish king's mother were confirmed, but it was already too late. This was devastating news for the royal couple. This news spread quickly and caused shock and concern among the royal court and the Spanish public. Many people blamed Victoria Eugenie for bringing this royal disease into the Spanish monarchy. Her family, the Battenbergs, had ties to Queen Victoria of England, who was a carrier of hemophilia, and this connection fueled negative attitudes towards the Queen. The royal couple tried to keep a strong front, but the illness of their firstborn cast a shadow over their family. A total of 7 children were born from this marriage, 5 sons and 2 daughters. The royal couple's second son, Jaime, born a year later, did not have hemophilia. However, he brought another misfortune to the family. The boy lost his hearing at a young age. His deafness resulted from complications after surgery, which, according to some reports, was related to treating an infection or ear problems. This made Jaime considered unfit for royal duties, and he eventually renounced his rights to the throne. The fourth child, a boy, was still born in 1910, which became another colossal tragedy for the family. The youngest son, Gonzalo, also suffered from hemophilia. Only one of their sons, Juan, the sixth child, was born healthy and grew up without illness. He later became the father of King Juan Carlos I, who restored the monarchy in Spain. The birth of 2 sick children and 1 stillborn strained Victoria Eugenie's relationship with the Spanish public and royal family, as many saw her as the cause of their misfortunes. The joy of expanding their family was constantly overshadowed by the challenges of raising children with life-threatening conditions, and this greatly affected the mood at the Spanish court. After the birth of their sick children, the relationship between King Alfonso III and Queen Victoria Eugenie also worsened. Alfonso blamed Victoria Eugenie because hemophilia was passed down from her line through Queen Victoria. The illness severely damaged the royal family's reputation, and many Spaniards also blamed Anna. Under public pressure, Alfonso grew colder and more distant from his wife. He felt that his marriage to Victoria Eugenie had brought him misfortune because the disease robbed their sons of a normal life. Another serious issue was Alfonso XXIII's own behavior. He was known for his many affairs, which not only humiliated Victoria Eugenie, but also weakened their marriage. Alfonso did not hide his relationships, and rumors of his infidelity spread quickly at court and among the aristocracy. These affairs deeply hurt Victoria Eugenie, and her feelings for her husband gradually faded. As time passed, the king and queen became emotionally distant. Alfonso withdrew more and paid less attention to his family, immersing himself in politics and personal pleasures. Victoria Eugenie, in turn, became more isolated, especially after the birth of their sick children and her husband's affairs. Victoria Eugenie's position during World War I was also difficult because she had family ties to both warring sides, while Spain remained neutral. She felt pressure from both sides of the conflict, creating tense situations. The Queen was actively involved in humanitarian work and supported the Red Cross, which was crucial during the war. Additionally, Spain began to experience severe economic difficulties at that time, despite its neutral stance in the war. All of these heightened tensions in the country, eventually leading to sad consequences for the Spanish monarchy. Alfonso X's reign also came during a difficult time for Spain. Political instability, rising Republican sentiments, and economic problems increased pressure on both the king and queen. Their personal issues worsened because the royal family lost the people's support. Victoria Eugenie, as queen, also became a target of dissatisfaction, and their already weakened marriage suffered even more. All of this led to a deep rift in the marriage of the king and queen. Their relationship became formal, and they led separate lives despite remaining married. Queen Victoria Eugenie felt very unhappy, and her life seemed like a nightmare. King Alfonso III and Queen Victoria Eugenie had to leave Spain in 1931 after the Second Spanish Republic was proclaimed. Their exile was caused by political instability, the rise of Republican sentiments, and growing dissatisfaction with the monarchy. The Spanish people increasingly rejected Alfonso III's rule, blaming him for the country's economic problems, authoritarian leadership, and failure to implement necessary reforms. As a result, uprisings and political pressure forced the royal family to leave Spain to avoid revolution and violence. Alfonso III realized that staying in Spain could lead to civil conflict. To prevent bloodshed, he left the country and went into voluntary exile, though he did not formally abdicate. After leaving Spain, Alfonso III and Victoria Eugenie lived in various European countries, including France, Italy, and Switzerland. Formally, they remained husband and wife until the end of their lives, but in reality they did not live together after the exile and barely saw each other. Their life in exile was far from the luxury they were used to in Spain. Alfonso first settled in France and then in Italy, where he spent the rest of his life. In exile, he continued to hope for restoring the monarchy in Spain, but these hopes were never realized. Victoria Eugenie lived mainly in Switzerland. Her life in exile was marked by personal tragedies, the deaths of two sons, problematic relations with her husband, and political failures. In 1934, her youngest son, Gonzalo, died at just 19 years old. He was severely injured in a car accident and couldn't recover due to his hemophilia. Just a few years later, in 1938, the Queen's eldest son, Alfonso, passed away. He was only 31 years old. He also had hemophilia and died after being injured in a car accident. Thus, during her lifetime, Queen Victoria Eugenie had to bury two of her grown sons. Additionally, one of her children was born stillborn. This was a heavy burden for Victoria Eugenie. Despite the difficult trials, loneliness, and sorrow, Victoria Eugenie devoted herself to charity work. She actively supported the work of the Red Cross, helped organize medical facilities, and focused on child health issues. The royal family remained in exile for the rest of their lives. Alfonso XIII died in 1941 in Rome, never returning to Spain. Victoria Eugenie outlived him by several decades and passed away in 1969 in Switzerland. Their exile symbolized the downfall of the Spanish monarchy of that time and profoundly impacted their personal lives. Ina died at the age of 81 and was initially buried in Lausanne. 6 years after her death, her grandson, Juan Carlos I, became the King of Spain. The restoration of the monarchy in Spain was a significant historical moment. Unfortunately, the Queen did not live to see it herself. In 1985, her remains were returned to Spain and reinterred in the royal crypt of El Escorial alongside her husband. Her life was filled with hardships: the tragedy at her wedding, her sick children, the deaths of 3 sons, and life in exile. Her story became a vivid example that neither power, wealth, nor high status can protect from great suffering. Share your opinion, subscribe to the channel, and give it a like. Thank you for watching.